Welcome to Meet the CIO, a new career-oriented interview series presented by the IT Executives Council. My name is Lindsay Braun, Executive Director of the IT Executives Council, and today I'm very excited to present our latest Meet the CIO interview. In this series, we interviewed top IT executives from some of the most interesting companies and organizations in the world. These interviews provide our members and subscribers with invaluable firsthand insights as they focus on career tips, advice, and ultimately secrets to success. Okay, with that, there's no better time to introduce our esteemed panelist, Shane McDaniel. Shane is currently the Chief Information Officer for the City of Seguin, Texas, just outside of San Antonio. He has more than 27 years of experience across multiple IT disciplines, supporting the Air Force, national intelligence, reconnaissance, private industry, and municipal government operations. Throughout his career, he has overseen and supported numerous widespread technology initiatives. These include supporting military operations, global technologies, cybersecurity, networking, telecom, systems, and more recently, GIS visioning. Shane, welcome and thanks for joining us today. I'll let you share a little bit about your current role and background before we get to the Q&A today.
Sure, sure. Thank you for having me, Lindsay. It's a privilege to speak with everyone today. And that was very professional, by the way. Good job on that. A little bit about me and my career. I mean, you said it perfectly. I think you took that off my website, actually, if I
Sure
remember
did.
correctly. Yeah. So that's all the high points right there. I can deep dive in the sense and say that it's been a journey. I'm originally from a small town in East Texas. I mean, it's I can tell folks I'm from the other side of the tracks too. So to be a CIO at this stage in my career, it wasn't planned, it wasn't intentional, it happened very organically. But I tell you what, it's been a fun ride, and I wouldn't change a thing if you gave me the opportunity to do so. So I'm happy to elaborate, and I'm looking forward to this conversation. So again, thank you for having me.
All right, well, great. Thanks for sharing that background with our viewers. So we'll get right to our Q&A and we'll start from the very beginning. What inspired you to pursue a career in information technology?
Well, Lindsay, I wasn't really inspired to have a career in technology. It's a very accurate statement to say that whenever I was going through high school, I graduated high school. Keep in mind, this was internet was around, but it wasn't necessarily prevalent. So, I mean, growing up in a rural area in East Texas, I can't say I ever really heard of it when I was in high school. So that just wasn't in the works. College wasn't really an option either. Military was the way that I decided that I can better myself, have a better quality of life, uh, give me a skill. I do come from a military family. My father was a Marine. My grandfathers, both of them, one of them was in the Navy, the other one was in the Army. So we cover all the bases. And so I enlisted in the Air Force as a young man. And whenever you do that, as I'm sure a lot of your listeners will know this already, you take a test called, back in the day, it was called the ASVAB. I don't know if it's still called that anymore, but there were four functional areas within the ASVAB test. It was like electronics, mechanical, administrative. I don't remember what the other one was, and it just so happens that I scored very high on the electronic portion of it. And as I was going through in processing for the military and getting ready to go to boot camp and stuff, I had to pick out a career, right? And so I was very fortunate that my father was pushing me towards something that, he was a Marine, so like his experience in the Marine Corps was very different than my experience in the Air Force, and he was very adamant about me getting a skill that I can leverage once I'm done with my military career, whether I was going to do the full 20 or whatever the case was going to be. And so that motivated me. I listened to my father. So it, as we were working through the different careers, I saw telephone systems was one of the options, and I thought, well, telephones will never go away. So I think that's a pretty good career choice. And sure enough, they gave it to me. Made it through boot camp, no problem. They sent me to 6 months of training. And back then, telephone systems wasn't IT necessarily, but it just so happens the correlation between the two are somewhat seamless. There's a lot of similarities, whether you're talking about conceptual design, infrastructure cabling, how things are interconnected, the command language necessary for network switching, which essentially is like a network engineer, like how Cisco and all these other switches and routers, there are similar, it's not the same, but conceptually there's similarities. So I took that and I ran with it. So that's how my career started in technology. Eventually, telecom basically became IT. About, I would say, 6, 7 years into my career, I sort of made that transition. It wasn't an easy transition for me. Primary difference being understanding like IP addressing whenever it comes to networking versus how telephone systems work. But I was able to make that transition and it worked out pretty beautifully. And as I said a few minutes ago, if I could go back and do it again, I wouldn't change a thing. So that's kind of how I got my start.
That's great. That's good background on your path to CIO. Now with your experience, what would you say, how would you say your roles and responsibilities have changed over time?
Yeah, so I didn't pursue a career in leadership. It just kind of happened. I
Mhm.
spent 10 years supporting a security agency for national intelligence. And all of that, I shouldn't say all of it, 8, 9 years of that time was in Los Angeles. Basically, I was there for a decade. And then I went up to the Silicon Valley for about a year and a half. And then I went to private industry. So when I was in Los Angeles for so long, I showed up in LA in 2004, and when I showed up, I was the bottom man on the totem pole. They had brought me over from Fort Meade there, in the DC, Baltimore area on the East Coast. I spent about a year there, and decided I didn't like cold weather. I knew that already, but once I actually experienced it, I said, forget this. I'm going to go move somewhere warmer, and that's how I wound up in LA for 10 years. So anyway, I wound up working there and I worked for the same group of people, didn't change jobs, anything like that. And there wasn't a lot of turnover there. So it was literally the same group of people. And it was a shop of about 50 people, if I remember correctly. And a lot of military folks. I was a contractor at the time, working alongside the Air Force. And it was very similar to my experience in active duty, where you get folks away from like where they're from and their families and whatnot, and it just becomes more of a work family. So that was my experience there in LA, and I got pretty close to some of the guys there, including the guy that was my boss that whole time, who was a friend but also a mentor. And he kept promoting me. Like it was never a financial promotion. It was more like, hey man, you want to be in charge of this, or you want to be the maintenance lead, or can you do this? And I was always just like, yeah, I can do that. I guess I didn't have enough sense to ask for more money or something. I'm just wired that way. I'll just say yes to anything, I guess. Lindsay reaches out and wants to do this. Oh yeah, Lindsay, let's do it. So that it come to find out that approach to your career inadvertently, I would mind you, it led to bigger things. And then it actually did pay off financially down the road as I was gaining that experience in different areas, managing people, getting familiar with that. And that's actually how I wound up leaving Los Angeles, because they offered me a site lead position in the Silicon Valley, which is the equivalent, I would say, of like an IT director, like a department head position, a little bit less budgeting, but more of the day-to-day operational stuff. And I wasn't sure I wanted to do it, but I just, because I enjoyed being there so much with those folks, and I enjoyed living in LA. I know you can hear it in my voice and whatnot. It was kind of like a fish out of water a little bit, but I actually did. It became my home away from home, living by the beach there in Los Angeles. And I was in my 20s and 30s. It was a great place to be, a great place to kind of mature more into my career. And yeah, but I did decide to take the leap and become a site lead there for that organization. And it really kind of changed the trajectory of my career, I would say. So yeah, that's kind of how, the whole leadership came to be. I Once I got that position there in the Silicon Valley, and I found myself for the first time in my career leading a real estate project. We had to find a new headquarters in the area, basically. And I never thought I would be working like outside of the scope of technology. That was a new thing for me. And that project, it went exceptionally well. I found myself working with a real estate executive for the organization. It was a huge company, a contracting company I was working for. They send somebody out from DC and found a new home, and we had to do some construction. We purpose built a 5,000 square foot facility for my organization there in the Silicon Valley. And we wound up being on time, under budget, on schedule, all these things. And that contract, which was based more on the timing of it This was after the crash of 2008 and whatnot. So real estate prices, rental prices were way down in the area. So we wound up saving about $500,000 a year in perpetuity for the lifetime of this long-term contract for the organization. And it just kind of opened my eyes a little bit, Lindsay. It made me realize that, wait a minute, maybe I can do more than some of those limitations that I put on myself. I don't really think about things like that, but they just sort of like, I can't do that, or that's not for me. Like it kind of woke me up a little bit. Now I can tell you, Lindsay, the significance of that project here in my office. I'm not going to pull it out or anything, but there was a piece of paper that was on my desk the first day of my new job there in the Silicon Valley way back when. And what it was kind of the constraints of what had been done to that point for that facility's relocation. The government owned all this stuff, and the previous landlord owned all this, and whatever else is on there. And I still own that piece of paper. It's here in my office with me to this day, and it serves as a reminder to believe in myself and the things that I can accomplish if I just apply myself. I didn't realize it at the time, but I needed something like that to kind of wake me up and motivate me to continue to challenge myself and try to do the best I can do for my career, my family, things like that. So it really was a turning point in my career.
Yeah, now that's a really great message. And of course, the roles and responsibilities are always increasing, but it all started with saying yes, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I probably trailed off a little bit there. I'm sorry. The
No,
roles and
all good.
responsibilities, there's the organic part of it. Like as I progress further along in my career, what happened there in the Silicon Valley, I realized like, hey, I can do more. And I was ready to move away from, the federal government, supporting them as a contractor, and let's see what else I can do. And my wife and I, we were kind of frustrated. We knew we were never going to be able to afford to buy a home and do some of those things. We both have master's degrees. We're both got, good educations and all that. We had great jobs, but it was just not enough in that area because of the cost of living and whatnot. And so we had these goals that we wanted to accomplish in our life. And so I once we came to the accepted, I should say, that they weren't going to happen where we were. And it's like, well, okay, we got to make a change. If we really want to pursue this and accomplish this goal of being a homeowner and things, then we're the ones that are going to have to own the change necessary. So I opened myself up and hey, let's see what else is out there. And Dell in Dallas, Texas. Not the headquarters there in Austin, but they had a huge facility there in Dallas in the Plano area back then. They've sold it off since then, but they snatched me up to work in their cybersecurity middle management, is what I always said.
Mm.
And they brought me back home to Texas, which I always knew that I was going to do. There was never a doubt in my mind that I wouldn't come back home at some point. But there was never a timetable associated with it. I would have been fine going to a lot of places. But once it was, coming back home to Texas, it was a company that I was very familiar with, excited to go to work for them, and also cybersecurity, a personal passion of mine. My career had progressed to the point to where I was very comfortable with my knowledge base, and I built up my credentials and whatnot to sort of speak to that. So I was very happy to make that transition, and that was 2014, and it worked out beautifully. So my roles changed quite a bit there from the standpoint of now I'm looking closely at KPIs and key performance indicators, I should say. Stay away from the acronyms, right? SLAs, service levels agreements, because what happened in that world was we were based on contracts with several Fortune 500 companies that had hired the organization to own the cybersecurity actions necessary to protect their respective environments. And these were contractual obligations, and we have to have changes done within a certain time frame, and or there's going to be penalties associated. So it made me look at technology services and operations from a different lens. I had been a public servant for basically the entirety of my career up to that point, and now I'm thinking I'm working in more of a business environment where it's we're talking financial and like the impact that it can have, and so that was a different lens for me. I spent in total I've spent about 5 years in private industry out of my 27 plus year career. the rest of it being in a public servant role. And what I learned while I spent those few years in private industry, Lindsay, was that I realized that I actually am a public servant at heart, and that's kind of an interesting statement from the standpoint. I came to the realization, like, once you reach a certain point in your career and your salary, things like that, at some point it didn't matter to me anymore. Like, I left Dell to go to work for another huge corporation there in the Dallas Richardson area. And they threw more money my way than I ever thought I'd make in my life. But I didn't, at that point, I felt like I was tethered to the organization. It was 24/7, 365, that had employees all over the world. And and that's just the model of the business. And I totally understood that. But what I was missing, that feeling that I got, that this is literally what I thought to myself, Lindsay, was that I'm doing my job. I think I'm doing pretty good at, what the service I'm offering. But at the end of the day, I'm just making somebody that's already rich richer. And, like, for some reason that really didn't sit well with me, considering my work life balance was out of whack, and I just wanted more out of the investment that I made in my career. So I transitioned into Texas local government after that. I took a leap of faith that is somewhat crazy. The day before I turned 40 years old, I dropped my notice to resign, sort of unexpectedly, with my company at that time, my private industry company, because I was banking on that I had done enough to hopefully warrant doing something that I want to do in my heart for the rest of my career, even if it meant taking a pay cut or sort of having to make some sacrifices in other areas. I was very fortunate that my wife supported this fully. So yeah, that's kind of the roles and responsibilities then switched from a business mindset, money, doing things as efficiently as possible, to now I'm a native Texan that's serving my fellow Texans through technology and innovation. I went to work for the city of McKinney there in the Dallas area, and that was my first, sort of, I never even realized that, like, cities and counties and whatnot have, like, a full-on staff to do this or that,
Mhm.
technology, what have you. And so that's completely just, I missed the ball on that throughout my career. But once I realized that and I got my foot in the door, I realized very quickly, like, oh, this is what I'm meant to do. Like, being that native Texan, wanting to give back. That's just, again, being a public servant. So my roles and responsibilities began to change, or like my mindset began to change, where it wasn't so I mean, we do have to operate, with fiscal responsibility, taxpayer funding, absolutely. But now we do it through the different lens of, I think about 911 operations. I think about the utility services that I have in my current city, electric distribution, water, wastewater, a secondary water system where we're reselling that resource to other cities in the local area. We provide the technology foundation so those folks can send their emails back and forth. They can get those SCADA readings. They can watch those transformers that are out there whenever they go out and that neighborhood takes a hit, or whenever that 911 call goes into our dispatch center and they got a radio out, or they got to use the computer aided dispatch system and get that firefighter or that first responder to that home ASAP. And that's more of the responsibilities that I'm kind of naturally wired to provide. So I know that's a long-winded answer. I'm sorry, I was all over the place on that one, but yeah. So that kind of
Oh,
takes you through the career, if you will, and the mindset.
yeah, and it's great, but the responsibility is always growing, but back serving the people of Texas. So I love that message. Now you
Yeah,
did mention a couple that you've worked on, but what would you say is the most interesting technology project you worked on, or any other ones you want to mention?
oh yeah. There's been many at this point. One of my favorite ones. So currently, as you alluded to, I'm the CIO for the City of Seguin outside of San Antonio. Something I'm very proud to do. Um, One of my favorite projects that we've done here is a radio systems upgrade. Um, Probably there's a lot of folks that don't know some of this terminology, but they're here in the state of Texas, and it's probably true for other areas. I'm just not familiar with those states and whatnot. But we have something called a Council of Governments. And what that is, that's kind of a regional hub for a lot of things that local governments do, as well as they probably do many other things too, but that's how I know of. So in this region, it's there in your home, your town there, Lindsay, the Alamo Area Council of Governments. They did a study on this region back in the 2006 time frame. I might be off on my dates there a little bit, but it was somewhere around that time, of the radio systems that the respective local governments were providing and that they were leveraging for their communities. And the city of Seguin didn't do very well because there was a lack of interoperability, there was a lack of coverage, and so they were basically saying way back in the 2006 timeframe, like, hey, you guys need to improve your systems and whatnot. So I started with the city of Seguin in 2018, and it just so happened the timing of it, the previous radio system was going end of life, and it was no longer going to be supported by the manufacturer, and that's a bit of a problem, because we're talking about 911. The first responders communicate that radio is a lot of times is their preferred method of communication. Our utilities guys are the codes people running the streets and running around town and doing their jobs, they use the radios as well. It's a very utilized technology. Here's the thing, though, Lindsay. I didn't know anything about radios, so I'd never crossed that threshold in my career. So I had to do quite a bit of digging. I had to, research and investigate and just educate myself essentially. And we wound up going with a partner here in the region that already had kind of a purpose-built radio consortium where today there's well over 20,000 public safety radios that are utilizing that system today. And my guys, they can use their radio and they can talk to people clear on the other side of San Antonio, on the other side of Austin, as far away as Nacogdoches, as far away as Brownwood, which is for folks not in Texas, that's a long way from where I'm at, several hours. And that was a 2-year initiative. It was a couple $1 million to make that investment, and it was actually, to me, it was 3 projects in one. We had to deploy, like if you think about it, every single police cruiser, every single fire engine, a lot of the, not a lot of them, but several of the utilities employees and the trucks that they're leveraging whenever they're out in the field doing, like they have their mobile radios, and so they can pick up the radio from inside the truck and they can do what they got to do. A lot of the folks, they have the handheld devices, the portables that they wear on their hips or their shoulders or what have you. And so, like, there was the migration that was necessary for the individual, for the vehicles. There was also the actual upgrade of the system. And a third piece of that project, which was kind of a segregated project in a very rapidly growing community, Lindsay, we took this opportunity to expand our dispatch 911 services. They use something called consoles, which that's kind of the base whenever you see like a video or a photo of somebody working in a 911 center, that's actually called a
Hmm.
console. And so, and there's all kinds of crazy technology. You could see people with like 4 or 5 screens or possibly more, and each one of them is doing something different because they have to be
Wow.
ready to go when that 911 call comes in. So, like, we took that opportunity to expand our dispatch center as well. So that's why I kind of phrase it as 3 different projects, and it was very encompassing. And I've already alluded to, I didn't know anything about radios, but what I
Hmm.
realized was that you just apply basic project management principles. I do have a project management background. Um, Working with the partner, we hired a great business partner. It was Lower Colorado River Authority, which is LCRA, is what everybody calls them here in this area. They were fantastic. And so they worked with us hand in hand, and we were able to get that thing deployed. And here's why I love that project so much, Lindsay, was that we estimate it touched the lives of more than 160,000 people in this region. So a few years ago, whenever I first started, our first responders, our utilities employees, they had no ability to communicate outside of our own agency. So like the city of Cibolo was next door to us, and
Hmm.
it's kind of a crazy concept where one of our police officers can't hop on a channel and talk to the city next door or the county, Guadalupe County, Texas, where we all reside. We couldn't interop with them either. Well, today we can. And so, like, that directly impacted all those folks in a very rapidly growing community. People are flooding to Texas. People are flooding to this city. We have 53 subdivisions and over 15,000 homes in development. Our permits have increased some 500% the past couple of years. It's absolutely bonkers, Lindsay. So like we have that radio system in place, and I was so proud that it improved the coverage, the reliability. That consortium really opened the doors for interoperability for our first responders and utilities employees. And it was just at this point, I alluded to the real estate project 10 plus years ago that really like told me like, wait a minute, I can do more than some of these limitations I've already put on myself. You got to think outside the box. It was kind of a good reminder, like, if you apply yourself, you can figure anything out. And I think that applies to all the listeners here. Like if whatever it is they're looking to achieve in technology, their careers, whether it's IT or not, like that opportunity is there for you. Like the world is your oyster, and if you're willing to work for it, I think you can accomplish that. So by all means, it's something that I'm pretty proud of, and we've been flying ever since.
That's great, and,
How's
and a
that for
great
a
message
story?
too. That's
Yeah,
great. I
yeah.
mean, to not be familiar and have such a huge impact for 160,000 people. I mean, it's just great to hear, and I think a great message for anyone watching. Now, I think
Well,
I've
people took notice, Lindsay. We wound up winning the IT Innovation of the Year, which is a national thing from a publication. We won a GEMIS International Government to Citizen Award for that very project, which is actually an international organization. So people stood up and took notice of what was happening here in our little community. So that's another reason why I was very proud of everybody that was involved. I mean, we couldn't have done it without, city council, our city managers supporting this. Of course, the IT employees that were running around like crazy, figuring all this stuff out. Our partners were absolutely crucial. We were so fortunate to find those guys and collaborate. And by the way, because of that project, which we completed, I think 3 years ago now, um, some of the more rural areas, like I call our area rural, but there's more rural
Mhm.
areas that south and east to us. They've now jumped on that same system. So it's not just the folks that were in the greater Seguin region. It's now those communities that are popping up, and now they have better coverage and better systems, if you will, for their their sheriffs and things like that because of the project that was completed here. I don't know, maybe that would have happened anyway, but I don't think
Mhm.
so because they kind of needed our area to expand so they could then connect. So it's really been a beautiful thing for this whole region, and we're super proud of
That's great. Huge impact for the region and award winning. Can't ask for more than that. Now, I think
it.
your passion for public service certainly had a role, but what do you think, what do you think have been the most significant keys to your success?
Yeah. I think most significant keys to my success is I'm one of those. I'm a very blue collar person. You know, I'm a walking, talking stereotype, as I like to say, of what a Texan is. If you looked up a Texan in the dictionary, there might be a picture of me doing something stupid. So I, I I believe being genuine is a very good attribute as you progress in your career. Maybe you're going up the leadership chain. Someone that man, I got a lot of feelings on this, Lindsay. Like someone you have to. It's almost like at some point in your career. Let's speak about this from the CIO perspective. At some
Sure.
point in your career, you're going to break away from the technology a little bit. So, like, I'm quick to tell people, like, man, conceptually, I still understand all this stuff, but like, I'm also barely an IT guy anymore. I am more of a facilitator. I am a communicator. I am someone that makes things happen for other people that maybe rely on technology to accomplish whatever their responsibilities are. So be that representative, be that person that those individuals need. Own your space, but do so in a very in a manner that is conducive for the culture that you're in. One of the things that I caught on to very early on, Lindsay, in working in Texas local government is it's kind of old school. Being rural upbringing, growing up in a small town and stuff. It's like I was made to do this or something, right? It's Even though I achieved a level of success in the military, the DC, Los Angeles, Silicon Valley, I wouldn't change any of those things. Like that, those were great experiences for me. I have friends for life as a result of that, and it brought such great experience that I've always like brought forward to my organizations that I've worked with subsequently. So like, gathering that experience and bringing it to the organizations that, you're now a part of or you're hoping to lead one day in the future. I just think applying yourself and doing what is necessary, but doing it in a manner. One of the things I tell my managers today is just be cool with people. That's one of the secrets to success. Have a good attitude. If somebody asks for something, if they send you an email, you say you're going to get back to them at such and such day, at such and such time, hold yourself accountable to that. That's a fundamental aspect to how we do business here in the city of Seguin, and it's paid dividends many times over. The IT department here in the city, thankfully, has a great reputation, and we just use some of those basic principles that they're not really technology attributes necessarily, they're people attributes. So you treat people how you want to be treated yourself, and those, just sort of that realistic approach to your career, your life. I feel like that's what those keys to success have been, is just being that guy, you know.
Yeah, I like some of those that they're not so technology based because at the end of the day, having a good attitude goes a long way.
That sort of speaks to my approach to hiring. I've been hiring people for 15
Mm,
years now in my career, and I mean, by all means, your credentials, your resume, that gets your foot in the door. But I always feel like once your foot is in the door, you got that interview scheduled. Everybody's on an equal footing there. So like, you could have all the experience in the world, all the degrees, whatever, but if you don't have the right attitude, you're not going to work for my organization, because I'm always going to choose that person that they got the right attitude. They're not going to negatively impact morale, or I believe that they won't. Just they'll be a good addition to the team. I'm always thinking about my team members whenever I'm hiring somebody new. How is this person going to fit in? Because I care about my employees and I don't want to invite like a negative presence and whatnot. So like that very much matters to me, morale, culture, things like that. And that's another thing. I don't have a lot of turnover I got to deal with. I'm very fortunate in that sense. More than half my staff graduated from the local ISDs here in the area, which is a little bit
mm.
weird. We don't have people with a ton of worldly experience. We're doing it with homegrown talent, and those guys are fantastic at what they do. I'm so proud of them. We do a little thing around here I like to call country IT, which is a little unorthodox, but it works for this culture, for this environment. And we have 17 awards from the state to the national to the international level, to kind of various things we've done with innovation and whatnot, to kind of reflect the incredible work that they're doing. They've also been awarded Employee of the Month 9 times in 5 years, so clearly something special is happening here in the city of Seguin with technology and innovation, and it's really because of them. So yeah, we take that stuff seriously.
Yeah, and that's interesting you mentioned that. We're actually doing our annual CIO talent study right now, and the results for that are actually trending towards high turnover. So I think, you having the opposite result is a testament to, some of the things you've shared about building a good team.
I always hire for attitude over the talent there, because I feel like we can train people to learn the skill
Mhm.
sets. If they have the right attitude, we can train people what they need to know, and that's paid dividends many times over. I literally hired the guy that delivered a TV to my house a couple of years ago. That guy's killing it. There was a guy on my staff we hired as an intern. He was stocking shelves at an Amazon warehouse, and
Mm.
it's bizarre to me how he didn't already have a job in IT. He had a 4-year degree from the University of South Florida in technology, and he literally just needed somebody to give him a chance, and we gave him that chance. That guy's been promoted twice since we brought him on board full time, so he's just absolutely knocking it out of the park. And my team is just full of people and stories like that. It really is. I love it. It's cool.
That's great. Now you've talked about some of the personal keys to success. What do you think about any specific, tools or solutions that help you be more effective in your role?
Yeah, we that's kind of the fun thing. That's another thing I love about local government, Lindsay, is that we got our hands in everything. So you might be
Mhm.
helping somebody with their computer that morning. It might be a telecom issue after that. It might be who knows what server might go down that afternoon. And maybe the CEO of the city, the city manager might have a little issue that you got to run over and take care of after that. We got our hands all over fiber and interconnectivity and cybersecurity, you name it. So truly, no 2 days are the same. And all that means, I guess I just say that to say this is that there is just a myriad of tools that we leverage to help run our environment. I have 11 full-time staffers right now within the IC department here in our little city, and we run the gamut. So having that background in telecom, that background in networking and cybersecurity, of course, I'm kind of predisposed to, be into that stuff. We just spun up a GIS division that's going exceptionally well. So I've been familiarizing myself with Esri technology. I think that's super cool, kind of the pretty maps and stuff that everybody sees,
Mhm.
sort of the back end of that, which is real super interesting. So I guess I love the technology. Like our one of the first big projects that we did, I inherited what's called a flat network, and all that means, Lindsay, is that it didn't have dynamic routing. It didn't have what's known as layer three in like the IT nerd world, right? So we had to go through, and that was an enormous project. It took us a year of preparation and sort of legwork before we could flip the switch and just add that additional layer to have traffic routed everywhere. We did a lot of work with fiber for building interconnectivity, connecting our three data centers so data could go in different directions. Um, so I really enjoy and appreciate the foundation that was built through the infrastructure cabling with fiber and whatnot, and the network enterprise. We went with a product called Extreme Networks. I'm such a huge fan of their products, and we have so many of them as far as like their tools to like a single pane of glass. It's called the XMC, the Extreme Management Center, to manage our networking infrastructure. So I love that stuff. I'm such a fan of nomic networks and their intrusion prevention, intrusion detection devices. It's just there's so much stuff. Um, so that's more on the technology side of the house. I'm still as far as the key performance indicators and more of the administrative side of what I do, which is primarily my role here in the city. I'm still kind of old school in that sense. There's a guy that might hear this. My buddy next in the city next door. His name is Tony Gonzalez, with the city of New Braunfels. He's the CIO there, and we've been friends for years. And he is such a goober for a technology called a smart sheet. That's like this big joke in the state of Texas because he's always bringing it up. And, hey, there's Tony talking about smart sheet again. But truth be told, he turned me on to them a few years ago. And I leverage Smartsheet to kind of reflect some of the data that I track. I have about 25 key performance indicators, the various reporting features of the tools that we have in this environment that I consume that data, and then I turn it into like a pretty map for the city manager, the CEO of the city. So he can have that data. If he wants to talk about any of it, I'll give him little updates like, here's what this means. I have a standing one-on-one meeting with him every couple of weeks, and we'll talk about stuff like that. And, he trusts, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but he trusts me completely, I think. And so, there's not a
It's
whole
the
lot of
smart sheet.
conversation around that. Yeah. So, yeah, but it's there for him if anything does come up. And of course, I'm a phone call away, a text message, whatever he needs to, whenever it comes to his role running the city. So, yeah, there's a bunch of tools for you that I leverage to just kind of run the show here.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for sharing those examples, particularly relevant to any of those in local government. So I'm excited for our last question. I know you mentioned you kind of took maybe a non-traditional path to CIO, or maybe you weren't inspired to pursue a career in information technology, but what would you give to others that do seek a career as a CIO?
Um, Man, you kind of got to play the game, right? I think some of these positions can probably be more political than the one I have. Being in a blue collar environment, we don't really play those games a whole lot. It's very, the being genuine is really the value add here in my organization, and I don't have enough experience in other organizations in this role to sort of speak to that. But my career was a bit unorthodox, and it did happen very organically, and it has been a journey, one that I truly appreciate so much, and I can look back and think about some of those milestones, and I kind of live with a lot of gratitude and just appreciation. But what other people can do, I can only offer up what worked for me. And I tell you, in addition to building my career and sort of being receptive to the world, being receptive to change, when I was, growing up in a bubble in small town Texas and enlisting in the Air Force and volunteering for all overseas assignments, I was stationed over in Europe for 3.5 years. I wanted to go. I wanted to go, see what it was like to live in these different places. Spending a year of my life in DC and 10 years in Los Angeles and the other places that I've had the good fortune to live, and making the friends along the way, and keeping in touch with them, and just being receptive to life, I would say. But in addition to that, working full time, and creating that life, and at some point I met my future wife and whatnot. I spent 12 years taking night classes to finish my bachelor's degree, to finish my master's degree. I have 6 industry certifications, but it's like alphabet soup after my name on my business card, right, or on LinkedIn. That was a lot of work. It was literally 12 years. And please understand, there was a lot of breaks between there. I didn't, go straight through, obviously, but moving from place to place and changing jobs a few times, and then I got a family to think of. It's at, halfway through that. So like the investment necessary, how far are you willing to go to achieve that dream of yours? So if you're willing to be all in, if you want it that much, and you kind of live your life with that chip on your shoulder, and you think you can. Trust me, you can. And you just got to commit yourself. You got to be accountable. You have to have that persistence in life, and you got to want it, and you got to be willing to do what's necessary to earn that role, because you might come a point in your current company where, like, man, the CIO's been there for 10 years, and he or she tells me, like, I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to retire here in 15 years. I don't know. Maybe you're ready for that role now. Well, guess what? You're probably going to have to be open to changing career fields, or changing companies, I should say, working in a different you know business line, if you will. So, but if you want it that bad, that opportunity will be there for you if you prepared yourself for that role. You just got to be willing to commit to it. So that's my trajectory. I know that's kind of a harsh blue collar approach. I didn't go to fancy schools, anything like that. It was very much a bootstrap approach to it. But I tell you what, working hard and pursuing your goals in life, and then when you get a chance to achieve them, no one will appreciate it more than you. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, I live my life with so much gratitude because of the journey that I had to take, and just feeling like you have to kind of like work your way up, and maybe I was ready for that role a couple of years sooner, but it didn't come to me. It's like, well, you know what? You're not going to put me in that box. I'm going to go find that solution myself. I'm going to go, I believe I can be this. You just got to, be strong-headed about it, and be the best person you can be. And I don't know. I just believe people can achieve anything they want to in their life. So you just got to be willing to work for it.
Well, that's great. Well, that was certainly a journey, and I thank you for sharing your journey um, with our viewers and a little bit of your roadmap for success. We're very lucky to have you on here, as well as sounds like the people of Seguin. So, thank you so much for sharing these insights. I wanted to say a couple of housekeeping items at the end here. If you did find today's session valuable, please be sure to visit our website to see a list of upcoming interviews. And if you are interested in participating, feel free to visit the URL on your screen, itexecutivescouncil.org/meet the CIO. Once again, thanks for your time, and great success to you, Shane, and all of our viewers in 2023 and beyond.
Thank you so much, Lindsay, and thank you to the folks that listen to this. I hope you guys get something out of it and you achieve your goals in life.
All right, thanks so much.